Welcome to Bookish Mind Season 2. In today's episode, we dive deep into several foundational principles of Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich, from leadership and planning to persistence and opportunity. Hill reminds us that success is not luck, it's law, and it starts with a clear plan, a strong character, and a spirit that serves. And today, well, we've got quite a bit of material here, digging into those very laws and principles Napoleon Hill laid out. A listener actually shared some stuff focusing specifically on, the practical side.
Right, how you take that initial idea, that spark of desire, and the vision you build in your imagination.
Exactly, and turn it into, real results. So our mission in this deep dive is to really unpack Hill's guide to organized planning. What does it actually take to be a leader? And interestingly, the strategy behind marketing your own skills, plus how to handle those inevitable setbacks and where Hill thought the big opportunities were.
Yeah, it's about getting down to the nuts and bolts, the path to riches as he saw. We're moving past the what if and getting right into the how to. Hill really hammers home that desire is the starting point, sure, and imagination builds the blueprint, but it's the action phase. That's the key.
Grounded in practical, organized plan.
Exactly. That's the bridge that actually gets you to accumulating wealth.
Okay, so let's jump right into that first crucial step then. Taking that crystallized desire and making it real through organized planning. Hill doesn't see this as optional at all, does he?
No, not even close. He's really emphatic, turning the powerful desire into its physical form, often, money, absolutely demands a definite practical plan.
A plan.
He states it point blank. Nobody succeeds in accumulating a great fortune without having practical, workable plans. It's like the map and the engine all rolled into one.
And right away, he brings in something we've kind of touched on before, but applies it directly here. The mastermind principle. Why is working with others so important, specifically for the planning part?
Because, the way Hill sees it, no single person, doesn't matter how smart or experienced they are, has the whole package.
The whole package?
Yeah, the full range of knowledge, education, ability, even the imagination needed to build, a truly significant fortune all by themselves.
Oh, okay.
So to really leverage your desire, you need the combined brain power, the advantage of other minds. This alliance, this group, is essential for both creating a solid plan and then actually carrying it out successfully.
Right, like building a sort of collective intelligence for your goal. But he has some pretty strict rules for this mastermind group, doesn't he? It's not just like calling up your buddies for ideas.
Definitely not. He gives some very clear instructions.
Oh.
First, and this is really crucial, you have to decide precisely what advantages or benefits you are going to offer the individual members of your group.
Ah, so what's in it for them?
Exactly. In return for their cooperation. Because cooperation implies, give and take.
Yeah.
Reciprocation.
Makes sense.
People need a reason, some kind of compensation. And he knows it isn't always money,
Right.
but it must be something of value. They need that to invest their time, their knowledge, their effort over the long haul. You just can't expect to get something for nothing from your mastermind allies.
So it's a real value exchange, a genuine alliance.
Precisely. Second, you need structure.
Structure? How so?
You have to arrange to meet with your mastermind members at least twice a week.
Twice a week. Wow.
Or even more often, he says, if the plan demands it. And you keep meeting until the plan, or maybe the plans, are perfected, nailed down.
So it's an active thing, not passive.
Absolutely. It requires active, regular engagement. It's work.
And the third rule, the one he seems to emphasize the most, it's about the vibe within the group.
Yes. The absolute necessity of perfect harmony between you and every single member of your group.
Perfect harmony.
And he doesn't pull any punches here. He says if you fail to maintain that perfect harmony, you can pretty much expect to fail. Full stop. The mastermind principle, which is all about coordinating knowledge and effort in a spirit of harmony. It just cannot work if there's discord or friction. It's totally fundamental to the group's power.
So even if I come up with the initial plan, it still needs the group's stamp of approval.
Correct. Hill instructs that even if you originate the core idea, or the first draft of the plan, it must be checked and approved by the members of your mastermind alliance. It's a process of validation and refinement, using that collective wisdom to make sure the plan is as solid as possible before you start running with it.
Okay, but let's be real. You make a plan, maybe even with your awesome mastermind group, and it bombs.
Yeah.
It doesn't work. What does Hill say about that? Because that happens, right?
Oh, absolutely. And this is where so many people just throw in the towel. And it's where Hill brings in one of his absolute core concepts, persistence.
Persistence.
If your first plan fails, he says, simple, replace it with a new one.
Okay.
If that plan fails, you replace it with another one. And you keep doing that over and over until you find a plan that actually works.
And that's the big stumbling block for most people.
According to his analysis, yes, absolutely. The lack of persistence in creating new plans after the first ones crater, that's where most people falter and ultimately face defeat.
They mistake that temporary setback for, like, the end of the road.
Exactly. They see it as permanent failure.
So temporary defeat isn't really failure.
Not in Hill's book, not at all. He explicitly says temporary defeat is not permanent failure. It only means your plan wasn't sound.
Okay.
The experience you gain from that failed plan, that's incredibly valuable. It gives you the knowledge you need to build a new, hopefully better plan and start over.
Right.
He keeps saying even the smartest person can't succeed without workable plans. And finding the right plan often means going through a few that don't work first.
He uses some pretty famous examples to really drive this point home, right? Edison comes to mind.
Oh, Edison is the classic example, a total monument to persistence. Hill points out that Edison faced what he calls temporary defeat, what we just call failure, 10,000 times while perfecting the light bulb.
10,000 times.
Yeah. That wasn't just trying once and giving up. It was this relentless cycle. Plan, try, fail, learn, plan again, until he cracked it.
And Henry Ford, we see the huge success now, but he had early struggles too.
Exactly. Hill credits Ford's incredible wealth, not just to his genius, but to his knack for adopting and sticking to a sound plan. And crucially, Ford hit major temporary defeats early on, and even after he'd already achieved some success.
Yeah.
But like Edison, he didn't quit. He made new plans, learned from the setbacks, kept pushing, and eventually reached extraordinary success.
James J. Hill, the railroad guy, he faced this too.
He sure did. James J. Hill ran into temporary defeat when he was trying to raise the money the capital needed to build his railroad across the country.
But he didn't stop.
Nope. By creating and putting new plans into action, he turned that initial defeat into a massive win.
Then there's the flip side, the cautionary tale of Samuel Insull. Built a fortune, then lost it.
Yeah, Insull's story is a really stark reminder. Persistence and sound planning aren't just for building wealth. You need them to keep it too. He built this huge fortune, over $100 million, based on solid plans. But then the Great Depression hit, forcing him to change those plans.
And the new ones.
The new ones weren't sound. That led to what Hill calls temporary defeat. Now, because Insull was older when this happened, Hill notes he might just accept it as permanent failure.
Oh.
His ultimate fate, whether it's just a temporary setback or real failure, depended entirely on whether he still had that fire, that persistence, to rebuild his plans even in old age. It shows persistence isn't just for the young.
That really brings home Hill's famous quote about this, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah. It's the mantra he wants everyone to basically live by. A quitter never wins and a winner never quits.
Right.
He literally tells you, the reader, write this down, big letters, put it where you'll see it morning and night.
Wow.
It's that fundamental to his philosophy. And he also advises, when you pick your mastermind members, pick people who have this spirit, people who don't take defeat personally, who just see it as, okay, feedback, time to improve the plan.
Okay, so wrapping up this whole planning section, he challenges a really common belief about money, right? About how it's made.
Yeah, he takes on that old saying, it takes money to make money. Calls it foolish, actually.
Really?
He argues it's desire. That intense desire transformed into its physical form through applying these principles, especially solid planning and relentless persistence. That's the real engine for accumulating fortunes.
Not the money itself.
Nope. Money itself is inert, passive matter. It can't do anything on its own. But in his view, it can kind of hear the call of someone who intensely desires it and is backed by a definite plan and action. It responds to that focused energy.
Okay, so we've got desire needing definite plans, persistence through setbacks, and the power of a mastermind group. Now, Hill shifts gears a bit, applying these ideas specifically to selling personal services, which for many people is the starting point for building wealth.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, for most folks who don't start out rich or owning a lot of property, their main asset is what they know, what they can do, their skills, their ideas, basically their personal services.
Yeah.
And Hill makes a strong case that almost all great fortunes started either from being paid for personal services or from selling ideas. So if you're aiming for riches, figuring out how to effectively market yourself is, well, non-negotiable.
And right within that context, he lays out a fundamental choice, leaders versus followers.
Yeah, he basically asks you, the reader, to make a conscious decision. Which one do you intend to be in your chosen field? And the difference, in terms of potential rewards, it's huge.
Huge how?
The difference in compensation, in pay, between leaders and followers is vast. Leaders, just by virtue of their position and responsibility, tend to command significantly higher returns.
But he's also kind of careful not to completely dismiss being a follower, right?
That's a really important point. Hill says there's absolutely no disgrace in being a follower. But
There's a but.
there's a but.
Right.
He follows it right up by saying there's no credit in remaining a follower indefinitely. He points out that the road to leadership often starts by being an intelligent follower. Being able to follow intelligently is often a necessary step before you can lead effectively. An intelligent follower can learn so much, gain huge advantages, just by observing and working with their leader.
Okay, so if the goal is maybe to move from follower to leader, what are the key things Hill says make someone an effective leader? He lists, 11 factors?
Yeah, he gives a pretty detailed checklist for anyone aspiring to leadership. We probably can't go through every single one in minute detail, but we can definitely group some core ideas and hit the highlights.
Okay.
So, at the absolute heart of it, a leader needs courage and conviction. Hill calls it unwavering courage. And it's not just bluster. It's based on knowing yourself and knowing your job, your field, inside out.
Why is that so important?
Because followers just won't stick with a leader who seems unsure or lacks confidence for very long. It undermines everything.
Got it. And alongside that certainty, there's discipline, right? Internal stuff.
Yes, self-control is absolutely non-negotiable. You can't expect to guide or control others if you haven't mastered control over yourself. It sets the crucial example.
Okay.
And related to that internal state is having a pleasing personality.
Right.
Not necessarily being, super outgoing, but having qualities that naturally command respect rather than demanding it. Hill bluntly says no slovenly or careless person will stay a leader for long.
Trust and fairness also seem really high on his list.
Oh, absolutely. A keen sense of justice is vital.
Mm-hmm.
You need it to gain and, more importantly, retain the respect of your followers. People have to believe their leader is fair.
Mm-hmm.
And that ties into sympathy and understanding, really taking the time to get where your followers are coming from, understand their challenges.
And then there's the practical side, the execution, planning.
Leaders absolutely must have definiteness of decision. Wavering just breeds insecurity. And definiteness of plans. If you don't have clear, workable plans, you're basically steering a ship without a rudder. Disaster waiting to happen.
A leader also has to lead by example, right? Doing the work.
Yes, exactly. This links back to that principle of doing more than paid for. A leader needs the habit of doing more than paid for. They need to be willing to put in the extra effort, go beyond what's strictly required, especially doing more than their followers are asked to do.
There are also managerial things in there.
For sure. Mastery of detail is important, either knowing the specifics of the position yourself or being able to delegate effectively to people who do.
Okay.
And this one is huge. The willingness to assume full responsibility. A real leader takes the heat when their followers mess up.
Takes the blame.
Yes. If a follower performs badly, Hill argues, it actually reflects a failure in the leader's selection or training. Trying to shift blame, that's a quick way to lose your leadership role.
And finally, this kind of loops back to the mastermind idea, cooperation.
Absolutely essential. A leader has to deeply understand the power of cooperation, practice it themselves, and inspire their followers to cooperate too. Leadership requires power, and that power, Hill says, comes from cooperative effort.
Okay, so those are the attributes of an effective leader. And Hill then contrasts the two main ways leadership actually gets exercised.
Yeah, he drives a really clear line. There's a leadership by consent, which is leadership done with the sympathy, the willing support of the followers.
Okay.
And then there's leadership by force, which relies on authority, maybe coercion, without that genuine consent.
And his verdict on leading by force.
It just can't last.
Yeah.
He points to historical figures who ruled by force. Napoleon, Kaiser Wilhelm, the Tsar, their power eventually just crumbled. He argues that similar types of force-based leaders exist in business, finance, labor, even today, and they're also destined to lose their positions. People will only follow forced leadership temporarily, out of necessity maybe. They follow leadership by consent willingly and for the long haul.
This historical view leads him to talk about a new era of leadership, especially in business.
Yeah, largely prompted by the massive economic upheaval he was witnessing during the Depression. He saw a critical need for a completely new style of leadership. One based on mutual cooperation, a more equitable sharing of profits. Basically, treating employees more like partners instead of just, cogs in a machine. The old school top-down, force-based leaders. They had to adapt, or they become obsolete, become followers themselves.
And he sees this required shift as a massive opportunity for people wanting to become leaders.
Huge opportunity. He felt the Depression starkly revealed a major shortage of leaders who could actually do this, apply these cooperative methods. The demand for competent leaders like that, he said, far outstripped the supply.
So a gap in the market, basically.
Exactly. Hill explicitly tells the reader, this necessity for a new kind of leadership may be your opportunity. If you cultivate these attributes, this cooperative approach, well, there was, and he argues there continues to be, fertile ground for those who can lead with consent and cooperation.
Okay, so we've talked about what makes leaders succeed. Now let's flip it. What makes people, leaders included, fail? Hill spends a lot of time identifying these roadblocks. He calls failure life's great tragedy, especially for people who really try.
Yeah, his analysis was pretty sobering. He figured that a staggering 98% of the people he studied were ultimately, well, failures in whatever their main goal was.
90%.
It's a huge number.
Right.
And he believed it was absolutely crucial to understand why so many people fail so that others, you could avoid those same traps. So he put together this list of 30 major causes of failure.
30? Wow.
Yeah. And the goal wasn't to discourage people, but to give them a kind of diagnostic tool, something for self-examination.
Like a checklist of things not to do or be. We probably can't run through all 30 right now, but maybe we can look at the types of causes, highlight some key ones.
Exactly.
Ah.
The 30 causes cover a lot of ground personal limitations, bad habits, external stuff. Fundamentally, though, a big chunk boils down to a lack of clear direction or ambition.
Okay.
Things like lack of a well-defined purpose or lack of ambition to aim above mediocrity. These are basic reasons people either don't even get started or they just settle for less than they could achieve.
Planning and actually doing things must feature in there, too.
Oh, definitely. Causes like inability to organize details, especially for leaders, or lack of a well-defined power of decision, and critically important, procrastination and lack of persistence.
Ah, those two again.
Yeah. Procrastination, he knows, is one of the most common and, sneaky causes of failure. And lack of persistence is the flip side, people who are great starters but terrible finishers. They give up at the first sign of trouble. Failure, Hill says flat out, just cannot cope with persistence.
Personality and how you deal with people also seem like big factors for Hill.
Huge. A negative personality is high on his list because it actively pushes away the very cooperation you need to succeed.
Yeah.
Things like selfishness, egotism, vanity. These are like big red flags warning others away. And a major cause he identified is simply the inability to cooperate with others. He said it's a top reason people lose jobs and miss opportunities.
Okay.
Also related are things like wrong selection of associates in business or even wrong selection of a mate in marriage, because disharmony, whether it's at home or at work, just kills your ambition and focus.
What about internal stuff like self-management or your mental state?
Several points hit on that. Lack of self-discipline, the inability to control your negative habits, ill health, which he often links to controllable things like diet or negative thinking, intemperance in its various forms, eating, drinking, sex, lack of controlled sexual urge, that powerful energy needs to be channeled, transmuted, and even lack of enthusiasm.
Enthusiasm.
Yeah, if you're not enthusiastic, you can't be convincing. He also includes superstition and prejudice because they represent a closed mind, fear, and block you from gaining knowledge and seeing opportunities.
Are there financial habits or mindsets on the list?
Yep. Like the habit of indiscriminate spending, which leads to a fear of poverty that undermines your confidence when you need to negotiate or take risks. Or an uncontrolled desire for something for nothing, that gambling instinct he saw running wild before the 1929 stock market crash. Lack of capital is also on the list, though Hill kind of suggests this is often more of a symptom of other failures rather than the root cause itself. And it's something that sound planning and persistence can often overcome.
Does he mention things you can't control, like background or environment?
He does. Unfavorable hereditary background, like limited natural brain power, is the only cause he lists that he says isn't easily fixable by the individual alone, though he suggests the mastermind principle can help bridge even that gap.
Interesting.
And unfavorable environmental influences during childhood acknowledges how a negative early environment or bad associations can instill harmful tendencies or habits.
It's a really comprehensive list, and he says just one of these could be enough to sink you.
Exactly. Hill states pretty clearly that any single one of these 30 causes can be sufficient to cause failure, whether it's in leadership or just in achieving your main goals in life, which is why he puts such a massive emphasis on self-analysis.
Right, back to that ancient wisdom. Man, know thyself.
You absolutely have to. To effectively market your services, to succeed in anything really, you must know yourself, your strengths, and your weaknesses.
Why both?
Knowing your weaknesses is critical so you can work on eliminating them or finding ways around them, maybe through your mastermind group. And knowing your strengths allows you to capitalize on them, to showcase them.
And he stresses that this analysis needs to be brutally honest, which is tough.
It really is. Most people, he argues, just can't see themselves the way others do. We tend to deceive ourselves. So while you can try to do self-analysis alone, he strongly recommends finding someone who knows you well and who has the courage and honesty to help you see yourself accurately, even if the truth is a bit uncomfortable.
He tells a little story about knowing your worth versus just what you want.
Yeah, the young guy applying for a job, the potential employer offers to pay him based on what he proves he's worth after a week's trial.
And the guy says no.
Right. He refuses, saying he's already getting more at his current job. Hill uses this to show how people often confuse what they want or need financially with what they are actually worth in the marketplace. Your true worth, Hill argues, isn't based on your bills or your desires. It's measured solely by your ability to provide useful service or to get others to provide useful service effectively. You need to be sure you are genuinely worth more before you start demanding more pay or looking for a new role.
That self-analysis sounds vital, but Hill doesn't frame it as a one-and-done thing, does he? He pushes for an annual self-inventory.
Yeah, he sees it as absolutely essential. Just like a shopkeeper takes inventory of their stock, someone selling personal services needs to take inventory of themselves regularly.
Why annually?
The idea is to track your progress over time. Are you improving? Are your faults decreasing? Are your virtues increasing? Life isn't static, right? You're either moving forward, standing still, or sliding backward. This analysis helps you see which way you're heading. He suggests doing it at the end of the year, maybe to help set meaningful New Year's resolutions.
And he actually provides a list of questions for this annual review.
He does. A specific list of 28 questions. It's a structured tool designed to make you reflect honestly on all the principles we've been talking about.
28 questions. Can we get a feel for what kinds of things they cover?
Sure. They really push you to evaluate things like, did you actually achieve the objective you set for the year? What was the quality of the service you delivered? Did you improve it? How about the quantity? Did you give your maximum effort?
So, performance-focused.
Yes, but also about attitude and habits. Was your spirit harmonious and cooperative? Did procrastination hurt your efficiency? Did you improve your personality? Were you persistent in following your plans?
Decision-making, too.
Definitely. Did you make decisions promptly and definitely? Did any of those 6 basic fears hold you back? Were you overcautious or undercautious?
It sounds like it gets into relationships and personal conduct as well.
Absolutely. How are your relationships with associates? Pleasant? If not, was it your fault? Did you waste energy through lack of concentration? Were you open-minded and tolerant? Did you improve your skills? Were you intemperate in any habits? Did you express egotism? Did your conduct earn respect?
Wow, it's thorough. What about practical things like money and career choice?
Yep. Questions about whether you budgeted your time, expenses, and income effectively. Did you waste time on unprofitable efforts? How will you rebudget or change habits next year? Crucially, are you in the right vocation? If not, why not? And is the purchaser of your services, your employer, your clients, the public satisfied? If not, why not?
And it all leads up to rating yourself on these success principles.
Exactly. The final step is a fair, frank self-rating, which again, Hill suggests you get checked by someone courageous who knows you well. The real value of going through this tough process, he says, is the concrete data it gives you.
Data for what?
Information to market yourself more effectively, to move towards leadership, and even, if you're in charge of others, to judge them more fairly. It's about bringing objective assessment to your personal growth.
Okay, so now, shifting focus, we've talked a lot about the individual. Where can you actually apply all this? Hill points very specifically to America as a land of opportunity.
He really does. He frames America, of his time, remember, as a place of almost unparalleled freedom for anyone who follows the law.
What kinds of freedom?
Freedom of thought, education, religion, politics. Freedom to choose your business or profession, to accumulate and own property without hassle. Freedom of where you live, who you marry. Equal opportunity he specifically mentions for different races. Freedom to travel between states, choose your food, and aim for any station in life, even the presidency. These freedoms, he argues, are opportunities of the highest kind.
And he tries to illustrate this abundance through everyday life, right? The
Yeah.
basics.
Yeah, he uses this really vivid example of a simple breakfast in New York City, costing, back then, maybe 20 cents.
20 cents.
Right. And he details where everything comes from: tea from China, bananas from South America, wheat from Kansas, eggs from Utah, all brought together cheaply because of this huge, complex, coordinated system. He sees this incredible variety and affordability as proof of the system's power and efficiency. Even taxes, he notes, were covered in that tiny price.
Shelter and clothing, too.
Same idea. Comfortable, heated apartments readily available for reasonable rent, packed with modern conveniences, electricity for lights, cooking, vacuums, refrigerators, radios providing free entertainment, all accessible. And clothing, he estimated an average person could dress well for under $200 a year.
And he contrasts this with
With the situation in other countries at the time, Germany, Russia, Italy, parts of Europe and Asia, where freedoms were curtailed, travel was restricted, and basic goods were often harder to come by.
And he attributes this American miracle of abundance and opportunity to something he calls organized capital.
Yes, and this is a really central concept to understanding Hill's worldview. He's very clear. Capital isn't just money sitting in a vault. It's these highly organized, intelligent groups of people.
Who are these people?
Scientists, educators, engineers, chemists, inventors, business experts, financiers. People who coordinate their efforts and use money efficiently. Their goal: partly public good, partly profit. They are, in his eyes, the brains of civilization.
The brains.
Yeah, they're the ones driving progress, building the infrastructure, supporting colleges and hospitals, funding research, managing the incredibly complex details of modern society. Money, without these organized brains directing it, he thinks it's useless, even dangerous. But money combined with efficient brains, that's essential for all these societal benefits we enjoy.
And he connects this directly back to that breakfast example.
Absolutely. He challenges you.
Yeah.
Imagine trying to get that simple breakfast without the massive investment behind it. The machinery, the ships, the railroads, the armies of trained workers needed to operate it all.
Right.
The cost runs into hundreds of millions just for transport, let alone production, packaging, marketing, wages. This doesn't happen by magic. It happens because of people, capitalists, he calls them, who have imagination, faith, enthusiasm, decision, persistence.
And they're motivated by
the desire to build, to achieve, to provide a service, and, yes, to earn profits. They end up in the path of riches, Hill argues, precisely because they render this essential service of organizing resources and effort on a massive scale.
Now, he definitely acknowledges that this view of capitalists wasn't, and maybe still isn't, always popular.
Oh, absolutely. He notes they're often criticized, called predatory interests of Wall Street by soapbox orators, radicals, certain politicians, some labor leaders.
So why does he defend this view?
Hill states his purpose isn't to jump into economic or political debates or take sides. His goal is to give individuals a philosophy for accumulating riches within the existing system. And to do that, he believes, you have to understand and adapt to the system that controls access to those fortunes, which he identifies as organized capital. So he presents this positive view, partly to counter what he saw as unfair criticism.
He even suggests that attacking Wall Street and big business during the Depression actually made things worse.
That was his perspective, yes. He felt that attacking the very engine of the economy, organized capital, was counterproductive. It destroyed confidence, cost millions of people their jobs, and ultimately prolonged the economic hardship.
This brings him back around to one of his core warnings: the danger of trying to get something for nothing, getting without giving.
He saw this mindset as a major problem, and not limited to any one group. He points to certain labor leaders of his era who, he claimed, were trading votes for laws that would allow workers to essentially take riches through organized force, the power of numbers, rather than earning them through a fair exchange of work for pay. He also mentions individuals demanding government relief payments while being unwilling to work, or people trading their votes for what he saw as raids on the public treasury.
But he says, in America, you actually have the freedom to try and live like that?
Yes, that freedom exists.
Right.
You can try to get by with minimal effort. You can even try to live reasonably well without working through relief programs as they existed then, the UT. And this is Hill's huge caveat.
Okay.
That freedom in America does not bring riches without effort. It absolutely does not guarantee wealth if you're not providing value.
So the only reliable way to legally get and keep riches is by rendering useful service.
That's his bottom line. He argues that no system can last if it allows people to legally acquire wealth simply by force. like the force of a voting majority, or without giving something of equivalent value in return. This, he insists, is governed by what he calls the immutable law of economics.
Immutable law of economics. Sounds serious.
He presents it as more powerful than any government, any politician, any labor union. It's like this universal law with its own perfect accounting system. It keeps track of everyone trying to get without giving.
And there are consequences.
Absolutely. He says organized capital, Wall Street, big business, they understand this law deeply. Their survival depends on respecting it. It's like gravity. You can ignore it, but you can't escape the consequences.
And if someone really doesn't like this American system, this capitalism governed by the law of economics.
Hill's pretty blunt about it. He basically says, if you don't like it here, you have the freedom to leave. Go to countries with less freedom and fewer opportunities. He again mentions places like Germany, Russia, Italy as examples from his time. He genuinely believed America offered all the freedom and opportunity any honest person needed to succeed. Go where the game is good, he implies.
And he uses consumer spending to show just how much opportunity there really is.
Yeah, he rattles off figures, the millions spent every year on things like lipstick and cosmetics, greeting cards, cigarettes, movies, sports, even simple things like chewing gum and razor blades.
What's his point there?
His point is that all this spending creates massive markets. It fuels industries, provides employment for millions, and creates opportunities at every single step of the way for individuals to step in, render useful service, and collect riches in proportion to the value of the service they provide.
So, the system guarantees opportunity, but it doesn't guarantee riches for free.
Exactly. Capitalistic America, in Hill's framework, ensures the opportunity to serve and be rewarded proportionally. It doesn't promise something for nothing, precisely because it's governed by that fundamental law of economics, which simply will not tolerate getting without giving.
And this law of economics, it's like a natural law.
That's how he presents it, passed by nature itself, unappealable, like the law of gravity or the movement of the stars. There are inevitable penalties if you violate it, and rewards if you align with it.
So trying to fight it or ignore it is pointless.
Worse than pointless, potentially disastrous. You can refuse to adapt, he says. You can form groups to try and ignore the law and take what you want by force. But then, he warns, comes the dictator. The firing squads, the machine guns. That's the ultimate end of trying to defy this economic gravity by force.
He felt America saw a glimpse of this during the Depression.
He argues that the period from 1929 to 1935 was a painful nationwide lesson. The law of economics ruthlessly impacted everyone because, in his view, people had been swept up in a mob psychology, casting reason aside, trying to get without giving.
Even government actions like spending public money for votes.
He argues that result in debts that have to be repaid, eventually, by future generations, even unto the third and fourth generations, he quotes. The economic law demands that accounting.
And labor pushing too hard.
Same principle applies. Labor groups can push for higher wages and shorter hours, but only up to a certain point. Push too far, ignore the economic realities, and the law of economic steps in the business fails, and everyone, employer and employees, loses. The sheriff arrives, metaphorically speaking.
So his ultimate takeaway from decades of studying successful and unsuccessful people seems to be, respect the balance. You have to give to get.
That seems to be the core message, yes. Trying to get without giving is fundamentally unsustainable. It goes against the natural laws of economics, and ultimately it fails. Hashtag tag outro.
Wow. We have really covered a lot of ground today, digging deep into Napoleon Hill's framework for turning, well, desire into actual results. Started with that absolute need for a definite plan, right? Built with a mastermind alliance.
Right, and the critical role of persistence. Never giving up when those plans hit a snag. Recognizing temporary defeat isn't permanent failure. It's just feedback saying, try a different plan.
Yeah, that's a big one. Then we looked at leadership versus following, the key attributes of leaders who lead by consent, and maybe just as importantly, those 30 causes of failure. Kind of a checklist of what not to do.
Exactly. And we got into the practicalities of marketing yourself, your personal services, using that detailed brief, focusing on the value you offer, not just asking for a job, and remembering that ultimately, the public is your employer.
And that QQS formula, quality, quantity, and that crucial spirit of cooperation. How you do the work matters immensely.
And finally, tying it all together with Hill's perspective on America as a land of incredible opportunity, driven by organized capital and freedom, but always governed by that inescapable law of economics.
You reap what you sow.
Basically, yes. You get in proportion to the value you provide. These aren't just, abstract ideas from an old book. Hill intended them as practical tools for you, the listener, to apply.
Right. To analyze your own planning, your leadership potential, how you deliver service, what might be holding you back.
Exactly. It's about looking inward and actively working on these things.
So as you think about everything we've discussed today, Hill's emphasis on planning, persistence, leadership, service, and especially his view on opportunity being tied to that law of economics, here's something to maybe chew on. Hill insists that lasting riches come only from rendering useful service. He sees opportunity everywhere, but only for those who respect this fundamental exchange. If you were to honestly assess your own daily work, your efforts, through that lens of useful service, what kind of harvest does it suggest you're currently cultivating? Is it aligned with the level of riches, however you define that you truly desire?